So Adam, I was saying to you the other day that
Yeah.
if we were like a big famous podcast that actually sold merch, that we could have a shirt that just said "So Adam," because I realized that that's the way I start every episode. I literally
Oh
just
yeah.
"So Adam" or something close to that. So yeah, now I feel like I have to because it's just become a thing.
I mean, it's the evolution over the years, right? Like I feel like we've had those phrases that you've either started with or I have ended with, or
Mm.
there have been the consistent things. I think they last for a year or two, 3 years, four
We
years, maybe.
I don't know how far back it goes. It could be all the way to the beginning, but I do remember that I used to introduce you
Yeah.
with like a really elaborate kind of an introduction, like every
Yes.
episode. That was
Yeah.
fun, but I think I ran out of things to say.
I think
So
we got to the point where it was just like, you know what? We're just going to hit record and we're just going to roll into
yes,
it.
because it was the old school style of podcasting where you'd be like, hey everybody, I'm Aaron
Yeah.
and this is Adam and da da da. You kind of do this really like, you know, big introduction with a lot of enthusiasm and
Right. Right.
introduce yourself at the beginning. That was very like old school podcasting. Now everybody just kind of you just talk, right?
You
So
just
that's
talk.
we've kind of
That's
evolved over the
we've
years.
grown.
Yeah, in our 10 plus years, I guess now.
Yep.
But
Yep.
so we're up to uh the end, the end of the
Yeah.
season. So we're at the
Yes.
first half of the finale, I guess. I thought it was going to be called The Legend of Ruby Sunday, Part One and Part Two. Did not realize there was actually two separate titles for the two parts.
Yep.
So maybe it was always meant to just be two separate episodes. But I guess there is a to be continued kind of right in the
Right.
middle that leaves you hanging at the end of this episode. We could have waited and just reviewed them together as one big thing, but our reviews go long enough anyways. So I figured
Yeah.
let's do it as they're released. So we'll get this review done. Hopefully get it out at least a couple days before the final, finale comes out, and then we'll review that one. So, and then we'll see
Yeah.
what we do after that. If Doctor Who even stays on the air, I don't know. I'm hearing like all these rumblings that, depending
It's
on
wild.
this could be the final season. Well, no,
Right.
that's not true. They've already filmed
They
one,
have the
so there's at least
right.
one more. But you never know. You never know what could happen.
Yeah. I mean, it is a two-parter, and it's very interesting now, hindsight, after having watched The Legend of Ruby Sunday. And then you look at the title of the next one, which has always been out there. We've always known that it was The Legend of Ruby Sunday and then The Empire of Death. And then now, hindsight, knowing what we just witnessed in The Legend of Ruby Sunday, where it ends, the introductions that take place, or reintroductions that take place, it's like, oh, okay, they kind of showed their hand with the episode titles this entire time. It's not as obvious though without current context.
Yes, yes. So the info for this episode, this is The Legend of Ruby Sunday, which we've already established, Series 14, Episode 7, The Doctor 15th, Companions, both Ruby and Mel.
Okay,
Anybody else?
I'll take it. That makes
Okay.
sense.
Yeah. Do you think anyone else should be on this list? Anybody else count as a
No,
companion? Rose?
nah,
No?
nah.
No, no, not really. She never really traveled with the Doctor
That's
yet.
there was actually a very funny meme I saw about Rose, but we'll just leave it at that. It was basically like,
No.
go girl, show up and give us nothing. And that
Yes,
was
well,
essentially the
that
meme. And
that will come
that's
up in our conversation because there are definitely a couple characters that show up in this. I'm like, why are they here?
yeah,
Other
yep.
than to just have a cameo. Featuring Kate, Rose, Ibrahim. I guess he was a big enough character to get a feature here. Carla, Cherry, Mrs. Flood, the Vlinks. Another
It's
character that was kind of like, what?
why
What are
are you
we?
why are you making a return? And I guess there was an
Um,
upgrade at some point.
Main
You can't forget
enemy.
Morris.
Yeah, yeah. How did Morris not get on the list? Main enemy, I'm not going to say because that's kind of a spoiler. And then main
Yep.
setting is London 2024. Writer Russell T Davies, director Jamie Donahue, producer Vicky Dilo, and music by Murray Gold. All right, story number 311A. So,
311A.
so
I
this,
love it.
yeah. So this one starts out with something that we actually talked about previously about kind of the way the TARDIS moves through space. Does it,
Yeah.
it can go anywhere in space and time. It disappears and appears. Why
Right.
does it ever need to fly? Why does it ever
Right.
need to fly from one place to another? Unless there was something wrong with it, right? Like if it's
Right.
broken,
Yep.
it can't travel through time, so it's got to just kind of go the route that a normal vehicle would go. But that was like looming in my head as I see this TARDIS, like literally the opening scene is a TARDIS just zipping through the sky, going to land at unit. And I don't know why it's starting to bother me when
Why?
it happens all the
Okay.
time, so I should be used to it. It's not like a new thing with this season, but yeah, why does the TARDIS have to fly?
It isn't a new thing, right? But this season it feels like it's happened more often than not as we have this type of thing occurring. And it is pretty interesting considering what we find out at the end of this episode. And now looking back through the season and being like, oh, interesting. Has this thing existed the entire season, which is why Tennant and Donna have to jump out as it explodes fire and it's like wedged in half a wall and you do start to wonder if the TARDIS has been kind of jacked up for a while or maybe this entire series it's been jacked up.
I feel like now I just would need to pay attention because I do think there have been episodes where it does the traditional disappear, appear, with this doctor. So it's not like it only flies through space or
Right.
flies through the air. It just is weird when it happens. Like,
Yeah.
one of the most famous times that it happens is with Tennant and Donna back when he first meets her and she's in her wedding dress, remember? And
Yeah.
she's in the taxi, I think, and he's flying
Right.
alongside the taxi and,
Yes.
trying to get her to jump over and all that. So there are definitely some famous, sequences with the TARDIS where it's just flying around. And I guess in
Right.
that situation it would kind of have to. But yeah, this one kind of stood out to me as it's just zipping in. And they made such a big deal out of it. Like, all right,
They open up the bay
yeah, they
doors and
like
it
get ready for him, and
yeah.
they open up so he can skid in, and it's like, why didn't he just appear in there? That way,
Right.
he's not ruining the floor.
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, I
That's
thought it was worth bringing up.
the janitor is gonna have a heck of a time getting the scuffs and scrubs out of the floor.
Maybe he just
That's
likes. I could see that. Just the doctor every once in a while, he just likes to go manual, and he's
he
just
likes
like,
to
you
make
know
an
what?
entrance.
Yeah, I don't need to just appear. I want to like kind of fly in like a fighter
Right.
pilot. Um,
Skid and stop.
Yeah, so we get that he does show up, doctor on deck or something or like
Yep.
something like that. All the official
Doctor on the bridge.
doctor on the bridge. There you go. And then we get him coming out of the TARDIS, sticking with character, sees Rose, big exclamation,
Yep.
so happy to see her, all of that. So that this is just this doctor. He's very happy, very a lot of exclamations and loud
Yep.
yelling. And so
Grabs her,
this
picks her up, spins around.
yeah, this episode already is kind of starting off in a way that's kind of like hitting the things that kind of annoy me like right away. It's kind of hitting them and I'm like, "Oh no." Let's hope it can kind of get past some of this stuff. But we get to meet some new people.
Yeah.
We already see, well, new and old, right? This is kind of um a type of Doctor Who episode that's not my favorite, you know, and that is bring everyone together, to
Yeah.
save the world. This is
Right.
another trope in Doctor Who that happens occasionally throughout, where it's like, oh, let's just bring everyone together, even if they don't even need to be here, even if it is like you kind of mentioned earlier about
That's
Rose, just kind of she's just there, like she didn't
right.
really serve a function, but
No.
let's just bring everyone together and kind of help save the world together. I feel like this same story could have been told with a much smaller cast,
Oh,
even
absolutely.
if they had gone to unit. I feel like do you really need a, you know, 13-year-old genius and a robot and, a former companion and Rose and Ruby's mom? Like, do you need all of those characters here to tell this
Right.
story? Or maybe we can cut back a little bit on this.
It was a fairly large ensemble. And you started to get a sense of it just based on some of the cuts they would take to Morris as the episode progresses. And all he has to offer is like two words, and it's just like a funny quip. It
95%
isn't,
trap,
yeah,
yeah.
it's, yeah, yes, 99% trap, 100% trap, and it's here. Like there's these things that it's like, okay, we probably could have cut some fat
Yeah, and
from the
I mean,
episode.
to be fair, that character didn't bother me, like
Oh,
whatever,
I liked him.
Yeah, I thought he was kind of interesting. I wouldn't mind
Yeah.
seeing him, as kind of a regular. But did he serve a purpose? right? Like if you're going to bring in a 13-year-old genius, then have him do some genius things, right?
Right.
Like not just have him run the computer and, yeah, make say the line every once in a while when the
Right.
percentage of trap goes up. Uh, maybe he was just
Yeah.
there to be adorable and like, kind of, okay, this is kind of a cool new character and maybe they're introducing him because they plan to use him. I mean, anyone that's in unit and introduced will probably come back at some point. Uh,
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw any behind the scenes stuff. I think he initially was not supposed to be this big of a character and was supposed to be in the
Space
Space
Babies.
Babies episode.
Yeah. That,
Uh,
that one was one of those ones where it was like, wait, come again? Like you really were gonna cast him in Space Babies?
well, that's that. I didn't know. I just saw like a really small little clip about it, so I didn't know if there was
Right.
more information on what his role was going to be. Like maybe he was one that had grown up more,
Yeah.
or like, are you literally going to cast him as a baby and put him in a cradle? Like,
Right.
yeah, I don't know what the plan was. Maybe they kind of originally were going to do that and then realized, this is not going to work. Let's go with
It's
digital babies,
yeah.
which also didn't work. Uh,
It was a lose-lose. At
so
least
good for
allow
him.
a
Good for
good
him that he
actor to
didn't
save
get
face.
stuck in that
Right.
episode, and
Yeah.
he gets to be part of I guess in my opinion a better episode and he was fine. Like his role didn't stand out to me as being as useless as maybe some of the other characters.
Well, he didn't necessarily serve a purpose that drove the story forward, but he was there as a pretty consistent commentary on aspects of the story. Whereas other people were just kind of set pieces. They
Yeah.
just filled the background. They were a recognizable face. Morris, and I think Morris, now that the other genius in the room we find out is a callback to Maestro's episode. Now that she's out of the picture, I do feel like Morris will probably play more come the next episode. I think he probably will have a little bit more of a significant role come the next episode because he's going to be the genius in the room where the doctor's in a different location.
So
Um,
more is coming.
more of Morris.
More is coming, yeah.
More is coming.
There you go. And we just talked way more about Morris than I thought we would. Kind of like
Which is
like
why
a
these go long.
it's like a Danny Pink thing all over again. Like our
Right, right,
five
right.
5 minutes of Morris. That one was for you, Jason. So then we have the doctor basically says why he's there, right? Susan
Yeah.
Twist, this character's been showing up in everywhere they go. Now, this was a bit of a misdirect because we saw like,
Oh,
oh, the different things that she showed up
yep.
as, and you see the one where it's like this devil looking, kind of demonic character, and
Right.
you're like, oh, they gave us that flash in the last trailer, and you're like, oh wow, that's her finally revealed, right? We
Yeah.
should have known. They're not going to show something like that in the trailer. That was actually just another alien species that I guess they had come across at some point and saw her. So we've seen the versions of her in the episodes that have come before, but there were also other times the Doctor had met up or seen her that we never saw on screen.
Right. We've talked, or at least I've mentioned a couple different times, like it feels like there's these giant time gaps between the episodes, right? Like we went from Christmas to like July and now a little bit further on in the year. Time is weird when it comes to how long have the Doctor and Ruby been together. The fact that Susan Twist, I guess, has shown up is a Slugma and a Griffin and uh Bleat. Like she has shown up in other places as other things in episodes that we have never gotten to we have not seen. We will never see. They have
And
spent a heck of a lot more time together, and Susan Twist has shown up in a lot more places. But
yeah,
I mean, yeah, shame on us for actually taking it at face value and thinking it was a big reveal. But also, shame on them for making Susan Twist look like pure evil and then having it just be nothing at the end of the day.
right,
Like,
yeah. All the
shame on them
makeup,
for doing that.
all the time in
It
that
was a
makeup
cheat.
chair to get her to look
Yeah.
like that just for a misdirect. She did look like a
CGI
Borg.
is a hell of a drug.
She looked like a Borg in the one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Full on.
Yeah, so basically the doctor's saying, "Hey, I'm seeing this person, blah blah blah," and then Unit's like, "Oh, we're way ahead of you. We already kind of knew about this." He notices like the anagram, the name. So they show
Yeah.
her. They show like, "Oh, it's Susan Triad. It's this tech genius, this philanthropist." that is trying to, I guess, release some sort of software that's going to help the whole world. And that's
Yep.
about to happen. And the doctors, so they are kind of ahead of him, but at the same time, they're kind of as confused as he is as far as like, who is this person? Why does she matter? They haven't found
Right.
anything about her that would be alarming. But now we have a face, I guess, to go with, or a name to go with the faces, uh,
Right.
to know that this is Susan Triad.
Right. And it seems like Unit has been watching her because she is the tech genius getting ready to do something that will, in her words, change the world. And the doctor is familiar with her just because she shows up everywhere. And so when the doctor mentions and puts her face up on the screen, they're like, oh, we already know who she is. And we've been watching her for a while. They don't know anything about why she's showing up in all these different places, or even that the doctor has been seeing her in all these places. It's just like this, it's just a coincidence that they just so happen to be focusing on the exact same person at the exact same time. But then they take a really hard pivot, and the doctor's like, but I want to talk about another mysterious person,
Yeah.
Ruby Sunday.
Before we jump on that though, Ruby does say she's like, "Oh, this person's name is Susan." It could be the Susan that you mentioned before, your granddaughter. It could be her.
Yeah.
I feel like that's quite a leap. There's a lot of Susans out there. So, just because someone's name is Susan, but Ruby does make the connection and it does become an important story point through this episode. And you do think the doctor did mention Susan
Yeah.
previously, so you do think
Right.
maybe this makes sense that this would come back. It's also been a fan theory,
Yep.
all along about, who this person can be, and maybe it is, a regenerated version of Susan Foreman. That's her last name, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
And so
literally just
like,
pulled that out of the back of my brain and was like, wait, I don't know if
and
that's right. Uh, it's been a long time since we talked about Susan.
yep. And the fact that like, and another thing that I skipped over my rushing to Ruby Sunday is they also called out the triad, Susan triad, S triad, mix it up and it spells TARDIS.
Yeah.
So the fact that it's like Susan TARDIS, I think that is one of those things where it's like, oh, Susan TARDIS, granddaughter or doctor's granddaughter. The moment that they mentioned, oh, it could be that Susan, although I was probably one of the ones that was like, oh yeah, it could be Susan, the granddaughter. Once they were like, it could be Susan, I was like, oh, it's definitely not Susan.
Oh, really? See,
That's
I was kind of on the other side of things because I always thought the fan theory didn't make any sense. I was like, oh, they're not going to do that. If
yeah.
anything, they would use the same. I'm pretty sure that actress is still alive. Um, I'm sorry if she's not. May she rest in peace. But I think she is. And um, so I was thinking, oh no, they would just cast her or whatever if they're going to bring her back. So I didn't really put any kind of value in that fan theory. But then when they mentioned it in the show as a possibility, I was like, oh, I guess maybe it is. Maybe it could be her. Maybe it is. And
That's
this is also when Ruby learns about regeneration, which I kind of forgot it
yes.
never came up
They never
because
actually covered it.
yeah, I guess it just never came up. But she's like, wouldn't you recognize your own granddaughter? And he's like, oh, well, there's something about us Time Lords. We can change our face,
Right.
uh, which she seemed kind of bothered by. Which that does
Yeah.
seem to be a common thing with companions. They get used to their doctor, and so
Yep.
then when they have the idea of their doctor changing, then it's like, no, I kind of like you the way you are, and we've
Yep.
seen companions have to deal with that in the past. So they do make it a point of saying, she's like, oh, I don't want you to change. He's like, oh, no, I'm going to keep this face for a long time, so who knows?
And I appreciated that. I appreciated the visible discomfort on Ruby's face with this whole idea of like I could change and I could be different. Because to your point, it was very reminiscent of Rose. It was very reminiscent of Jenna Coleman's experience going
Oh,
from
yeah,
Smith
Clara,
to Peter
you had
Capaldi.
a hard time with Capaldi.
Yeah, that's so like it is one of those things that it's like, okay, I appreciate the fact that we do have a companion who I, for all this time, didn't understand that this was actually a aspect of the Doctor's character. Again, it felt like we front loaded so much in the first episode where it was within 5 minutes we covered every key fact about the Doctor
Just not that
for
one.
Ruby's benefit, just not that one.
They left that one out. I guess it
Yeah,
maybe, I feel like did Eccleston ever talk about it? Probably not, because when he
No.
regenerated, Rose seemed completely like, what's going
Oh
on?
yeah.
I don't think he even
Right.
prepped her for that. So at least at least Shuti was, at least 15 is prepping his companion for this possibility.
Yeah, but it was fun. It was appreciated on my part to be like, okay, we have someone who's actually exhibiting fairly normal human emotions to be like, no, you can't change. Like, you need to stay who you are because this is who I know and who I like.
I might be that companion that'd be like, ooh, that'd be kind of cool. I wonder what you would look like. Yeah. How many times
Let's
do I
do it
get to see you
now.
change? Yeah, like
Right.
can you control it? I'd have all these questions. Yeah. Uh, yeah, so like you were starting to bring up, then the doctor kind of shifts gears and is like, oh, there's another mystery too, and this is the mystery that we've kind of all cared about.
Right.
And that is, what's going on with Ruby and who are her parents. So I guess, hey, you go to unit, you kill two birds with one stone. You know, let's
Might as well.
let's find out multiple mysteries. So he kind of brings her up on the screen and says, hey, we're trying to find out more information about who her mother is that night. Morris does throw out another fan theory that, the mother could be the same person, it could be
Right.
Susan Triad. That could actually be the mother. Okay, so I like that they're kind of getting the fan theories out of the way and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
maybe as just like a little bit of a shout out to the fan theories or knowing what the theories would be. And so they're at least mentioning them as like, yeah, is what people would think, but it's probably not what's going to really be the truth.
And at least for this one, they're letting the genius throughout the answer. So you don't feel as stupid when the genius on the show is the one that's proposing your theory. Um, it did kind of play out uh, in a fun way where it was like, but you're saying that the person you can't see, how do you know it's not the same as the person you do see? I
Yeah,
appreciated that angle by Morris. Pure
right.
logic,
Yeah.
that one.
And we find out too that, oh, they have a videotape
A
conveniently.
VHS.
Yeah, like sure. But I wonder how long until they went and got the videotape. I tend
That's
to, I know that most of these places don't, it's not like you keep a full backlog of every,
no,
all of your CCTV,
right.
tapes. So like they usually kind of go through them pretty quick.
48
So the
hours,
fact that this
72
one's,
hours.
so I don't know how long they waited to go get this video, but conveniently they do have a VHS tape of that night, but there's
Yep.
not really much you can see on it. It's grainy.
Right. Carla and Ruby have already watched it multiple times. They've already spent a lot of time trying to figure it out. But again, Morris is like, hey, boy genius, unit resources.
Yeah.
We can do the CSI thing and just like high definition this VHS.
But Unit, I mean, they have alien technology. They have technology way beyond anything we would understand, Adam.
Yeah.
So, so
Just
yes,
use it, leave it to the Blinks. The Blinks will figure it out.
yes. So they're kind of cutting back and forth between what's going on here and what's going on with Susan. I keep wanting to call her Susan
No.
Twist,
Yeah.
but Susan
Triad? Does she have
Triad.
a
Yeah.
last name? Or is Triad the company?
No, they keep calling her Susan Triad. I
Okay.
think the company is Triad Technologies, but I think it's because that's her presumed last name.
Okay.
But they
Yeah.
keep jumping
Susan
back and
Triad,
forth. We
engineer.
know Mel is who the doctor was also excited to see.
Yeah.
Mel is part of this story too. She is at least she's useful. Like the
Right.
fact that she was brought in, was not a cameo like some of the others. This felt like okay, she's actually playing a part.
Right.
Maybe a part Rose could have played, but they brought Mel to do this, and so Mel is kind of undercover working for Susan Triad, but not like she hasn't seen any issues. She likes her,
No. Yeah.
and you can tell in their interactions and stuff that she enjoys, her and likes working for her.
Yeah. That's so we jump back to unit. Rose is told to run home to get the shoebox. As she runs home, she grabs her mom. Her mom's like, I'm coming with you. Well, if
Mhm.
Carla leaves, Cherry needs someone to watch her. So we get Mrs.
Mrs.
Flood.
Flood.
Random Mrs. Flood, who people have also had theories about,
Yep.
and gosh darn, she is frightening.
Yes,
Mrs. Flood is frightening.
yeah, we get a pretty quick scene with her, and at first, I mean, it makes sense. Neighbor,
Yeah,
gonna watch someone that needs watching. Makes sense to have the nice neighbor to do it. But yeah,
yep,
pretty much pretty quick. she kind of changes the way that she's presenting herself, and
Oh,
then she like this darkness surrounds her. And what does she say? Something about like he's not
we
waiting anymore.
I'd be very careful, Mrs. Sunday. The storm's coming. He waits no more.
There you go. He
Like,
waits
and
no
she
more.
goes from this kind old lady who tells Ruby, "Oh, you're still waiting for your growth spurt,"
Yes, that was a
and
funny
then
line. I
she
like that.
the whole like go get tea, and she's like, "It would be nice if you had tea, but we can't always get what we want." Yeah, to then all of a sudden doing the whole he waits no more, but we don't like her character, we don't know who this character is still. Like, does she in the end turn into what we saw other people turn into, or is she just a very weird, wicked next door neighbor?
I think she's obviously part of the coming of these gods, and the god, the one who waits is coming,
Yeah,
the big wig. And so I think, kind of like we had the Harbinger, these are his minions, I guess.
yeah.
And they're not as big of a deal as we thought, right? We'll talk about who else is revealed to be not as big of a deal as we thought later. But yeah, Mrs. Flood, all the theories and who she could be, and oh, she's a Time Lord maybe, or maybe she's a regeneration of this character, or maybe
Right.
she's
Or is
in the
she Ruby?
future Ruby, like
Yep.
this is what I say all the time, Adam. These internet theories mostly don't pan out to be anything. That's why I don't like to look at them. But this one, yeah, I don't know that who had this one on their bingo card as far as
Oh
she was
yeah.
just going to be, kind of a bit of a harbinger herself, but like just a minion, it seems. I don't
Right.
think she's playing a bigger part.
Yeah.
Maybe later something else happens, but the way I'm reading this now is she was just placed there, kind of to prepare for the coming, the coming
Yeah.
of this guy,
I
this
mean,
god.
and that's the thing. It's like, so okay, why would she be next to Ruby? Unless Ruby is connected to the one who waits, which we know that she is. So Mrs. Flood was just Ruby's neighbor forever, just to keep tabs on this daughter that was around when the one that was waiting was there, right? That's what the Maestro said. Why was he there? Why was he there from the very beginning? So yeah, she's probably just keeping tabs. She's the Obi-Wan to Ruby's Luke.
The evil Obi-Wan
Yep,
with
she's the
with
evil
bad
Obi-Wan
intentions.
with bad intentions.
Yeah. We did get a scene. It cuts back to unit again, and we get a scene with Kate and the doctor. A little heartfelt scene. She's talking about, reminiscing about her dad, and hey, I
Yeah.
remember him talking about you, but he never mentioned you had a granddaughter, and the doctor's like, oh, it
Yeah.
was a different time. Well, if you have a granddaughter, that must mean you have kids, kind of. Or what does he say? He says, not quite, not
Right.
yet.
Right. Yep.
So then, oh yeah, okay. How can you have grandkids without having kids? Well, timey-wimey, it's different for doctors, blah blah blah. So a nice little scene between the two of them. The doctor needs a hug, so he gets a hug. And this doctor is definitely different. We've brought it up before, kind of, is it because he's maturing? Is it because he's like a young version? He hasn't kind of
Yeah.
gone through the same things, a bit of a reset. But there is definitely some coddling with this doctor that hasn't been needed in previous doctors. We see later there's a scene where he almost needs to be told to stop having a temper tantrum.
Yeah.
So it's
Yep.
definitely a different personality trait that we may have seen glimpses of this kind of stuff with previous doctors, but I feel like with this doctor specifically, he acts younger, like a teenager, maybe a bit.
That's it. It's different. It's very clearly different. And I've been trying to find the words to put it out there to explain why it's different or why it feels different. And you can see it when you see it, right? Like in these interactions, you can be like, that's curious. Later on, when he's down on the when he punches the elevator door or the wall, and then goes down and does the whole like back against the wall, slide down, knees tucked in, hands on his head, and Mel has to tell him basically pull yourself together and fix this.
Hmm.
There's these moments where it's like that is so curious, like that this is the portrayal of the Doctor. So you can you know when you see it. That said, like there's other aspects where it's like, okay, I it does play out really well. there's just these weird nuances. That interaction though between Kate and the doctor, and then even some of the other interactions between Kate and the doctor, there's something weird there. Coming from 73 yards where Kate is like,
Oh,
I really love the doc. Like, don't ever let him know, but I really respect him, all this other stuff. And then we get here and it's like she's almost like, I don't know if you really are the doctor. And she's like digging in, like, what about your kids? What about all this other stuff?
mm,
And then later on in the episode, she looks like she hates the doctor because the doctor brought about the death of one of her soldiers, her guards. Like
yeah.
she looked downright
She
ticked
definitely
off
was.
at him.
I didn't pick up the same thing from this interaction. I don't think she's questioning if he's the doctor by any means. I think she, was just having a conversation with him, wanted to
Yeah,
comfort him. You know, I do think throughout all the interactions with Kate, with other previous doctors, there has been a little bit of a love hate. She
yeah,
loves the doctor, but she also knows what the doctor brings. And, she was trying to be nice, I think, in this situation, like, oh, I think you bring good things, but probably she's remembering all the horrible things that he's brought to.
right,
And, and then it does play out later when he does cause the death. In a way, he causes the death. I mean, the guy was going on his own. He wasn't like being
right,
forced to do anything.
yeah,
But, in an indirect way, he causes the death of someone that works for Kate. And she did, yeah, she had like daggers, for
right,
him
yeah,
in her eyes. So I think that was one of those moments where she's just like, yeah, I love what you do and that you protect the Earth, Doctor, but at the same time, you bring death and destruction with you at
yeah.
times.
They always seem to interact though as equals, if not her realizing that the doctor is a superior. I think in this one scene where the doctor's like comforting, or where Kate is comforting the doctor, it's like, okay, this is interesting. Like, I'm trying to think of a point of reference where Kate Lethbridge Stewart had to be like, hey, doctor, it's okay. I'll pat you on the back. As opposed to as opposed to approaching it as like, okay, doctor, fix this. Like, I know you can. Um,
I think it's more a reflection of this version of the Doctor and not
yeah.
of Kate. I think that's just the way I have convinced myself that my theory that I went through in a previous episode where he's just an adolescent learning to become the doctor. That's my
Yeah.
explanation. My explanation to myself when I see him go through these moments is it's not that he's not acting like the doctor. He's just acting a lot. He's acting like a version of the doctor we just haven't seen yet because he's not
So
matured
much
yet.
younger.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's a baby. He's just it's a reset. So he's still learning the ropes and still kind of coming to grips with everything and the power that he has and all of that
Yeah.
stuff. I think, we're seeing an adolescent version of the Doctor.
I mean, it plays out. It plays out.
Yeah.
So they come back with the VHS. Are we at that point?
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
Carla shows up. They won't let her in. The doctor's like, I'm the doctor. She now has immediate access. Um, and Carla's in the building now.
But we don't see her
So
still for a bit. It
yeah,
takes a while for them to go down and get her out of the lobby or whatever. Uh,
right. That's
they have to introduce us to the time window,
right.
which I thought was a pretty funny line when the doctor was like, I thought, or what was it? Something about, do you
You
guys have a
expressly
time
told us in
window?
the 70s unit was absolutely forbidden to experiment with any form of time technology. And the doctor's just like, yeah, do you have it? And Kate's
He's
like,
like
yes,
10 floors down.
10 floors down.
Yeah,
That's,
it's
it was
good.
great.
That was good. But yeah, so they go and look at it. I didn't really understand. They go in there. It's this very like, I don't know, very futuristic looking kind of
Yeah,
room with all the bells and whistles and it looks pretty cool. And then for some reason, the doctor was not impressed, laughed at it, like really over the top, laughed at it.
right.
They didn't really kind of dwell on that, but I thought that was an interesting decision or choice in that moment. And then they kind of just moved on and said, okay, as much as he thought it was taped together, a rickety device, he was willing to use it.
Yeah. I thought, to me, I thought that was like a brief glimpse of seeing some of what we typically have come to know of the doctor, where they see something that should be clearly impressive and they view it as being childish, abstract, like not well put together. And I mean, he's used to dealing with humans that have the teleport wrist bracelets and they can just punch in something and they zap through time that way, right? Like he's used to the Captain Jack and the River Song that have their own ways of doing this. So to walk into an entire room devoted to a time window, I'm sure for him it was like, oh, this is very entry level. But for the Doctor, I think to have that response to seeing something like that, I thought it was actually reminiscent of something that you'd see Smith or Tennant do, where they
Okay.
just laugh at what a room looks like.
So it worked
That
for you?
it did, it did.
Okay.
In Gatwa's portrayal of the Doctor, a little bit over the top, a little bit like very out there. But I could see like Smith laughing, like doing his whole like spinning around thing, where he's like, ah, like this is great
My
type of
favorite
approach. But
my favorite thing about Smith. The This was kind of an interesting technology. I will admit I didn't really fully understand what was happening. It kind of felt like almost like a holodeck from Star
yeah,
Trek
yeah,
where it can project an environment, but at
right,
the same time, it seemed like it was actually pulling from a like it was time travel in a way.
right,
They were
yeah,
traveling to a specific place in time, but they weren't actually there. It was like holograms around them, so they couldn't interact
yeah,
with
right,
things that were there. Um, the VHS tape, I guess, combined with the technology actually helped it be more
right,
clear because in the past they mentioned they had seen the signing of the Declaration of Independence, but they could only tell that the pen was white, that kind of thing.
right, yeah,
Um, Whereas this was a much more clear experience, I guess, because of the additional information that they gave the machine with a VHS tape, which is like the
yeah,
least technological thing that you probably could have used. But okay, yeah, I'm willing to buy it. I guess that the combination of, the time travel with a little bit of information about what it looked like and sounded like
right,
allowed them to recreate the space in a way that looked pretty pretty clear. Um,
right.
what was the Mel did make a comment though about the snow, about the way the snow was falling.
Yeah. We can see the snowflakes fell on a southeast axis, so we can model that onto the church and predict backwards. Is that what you're
Yes, I was
referring
like,
to?
okay. That line made no sense, but okay. That's fine.
That's
Because you
right.
can tell the way the snow's falling, now we can see everything.
Right,
Uh
exactly. That's the glorious nature of the VHS. I do like taking a step back further though, like they do ask the doctor, you have a you can time travel. Why don't you just go back there? And he's like, well, I've already been there. I've locked myself out of it. There's
yeah.
rules about these things. And they're like, well, you're the doctor. Don't you just
You-
break the rules? I thought that was a good call out, right? Like I have wondered the exact same thing. Can't you just like go to the other side of the church? Like
Yeah. Or go
not go to
further away
exactly where, right?
with
Like
a
find
telescope.
some way of doing it. Right. There's other options,
Fly a
dude. Come
drone above
on.
it,
That's,
we have all these things we could do. Yeah, it does seem like if you start to really question some of the logic behind the
yeah,
doctor's decisions on what he's allowed to do and what he's not allowed to do when it comes to time travel, it doesn't line up by
right.
any means.
No, no,
Every
no.
doctor has kind of done their own thing. They break their own rules. Why in this instance he feels like he can't break his own rule? Maybe he's afraid of what's there. Maybe, we know this
Right.
doctor isn't necessarily running to danger a lot of
Right.
times. So maybe this is just a situation he doesn't. He's like, I'd rather see it from a hologram as opposed to actually putting myself back in
Right.
that
Yep.
situation.
In the time window with things progress, right? And there's statements made during the entire thing that basically the video is changing, that they
Yeah.
thought they were going to be able to get a good look, but it's different than what it's looked like before. It seems like it's a 73-yard situation where it's like no matter what angle you try to take a look at this individual, their face is always covered. You can't make it out. Um, Ultimately, it's heartbreaking because Ruby, you could tell that she was so filled with hope that she would actually be able to see it. And Unit and the doctor both really pumped her up with the fact of like,
Like,
this
oh
is kind of
yeah,
a guaranteed thing.
just go get
Time
your
window
videotape.
VHS, we got this. We'll sharpen the image, Morris, you little liar. That's they can't get a good view of her, and the fact that it's changing is just kind of dumbfounding the doctor. Like, why is this happening the way that it's happening?
Right. And it was definitely some cool creepiness to it, horror
Yeah,
movie vibes when the lady, you could see her for a second, then she kind of, moves to another
yeah,
spot and you're like, whoa, where'd she go? And you can't see her face and she's pointing at the doctor and doctor's kind of freaking out, like he doesn't understand why he's being pointed at. Is she pointing at the doctor? Is she pointing at something behind the doctor? Is she pointing at the
right,
TARDIS? We don't really know. I guess maybe things that are revealed later in the episode kind of indicate maybe she was just kind of warning them because she
right.
know
It's
that there was something going on with the TARDIS. And so maybe she was just pointing at the TARDIS. Am I wrong that we still don't know who this person is, or we haven't gotten?
no,
Okay.
no. We still have no resolution of
Yeah, so
who
this is still a mystery
her
even
mom
after
is.
this
Yep,
episode ends. There are
yep,
some things that are revealed, but this part of it, it kind of all goes haywire when they're trying to figure it out. They have the guard in there with them, which I was kind of like, why do you need a guard in this place? But have they
yeah.
have they run into danger before? Uh,
With the signing of declaration, it got a little sketchy there for a
yeah,
little bit.
right. Yeah.
That's
Yeah, so they felt like the need for a guard to be in there. I think we all know why he was in there, so they could have somebody die.
yep,
So he, kind of walks around the TARDIS with the instruction of the doctor, but he was kind of being curious himself. He was
yeah.
all about, kind of trying to figure this thing out. He also can't see the face, but he's trying to see what's going on. He goes around the TARDIS, disappears. We don't see him again, and then there's something else. There's this like smoke monster, another lost reference, two lost references this season. There's a smoke monster that appears kind of around the TARDIS that's got like this, I don't know, this like glowing light coming from out of the
Yeah.
inside of it, and they don't know what it is. They're questioning it. Eventually, it kind of the disembodied voice of the soldier coming out of this thing, once again, creepy horror movie
Yeah.
vibes. This episode's definitely ramping up. It kind of starts out with this like reunion of friends, and we're gonna figure this out. And now we're getting into like, oh man, this is
Oh,
getting serious.
yep. And it's interesting how it takes that progression, right? Because like you, I think as an audience, as the audience, I'm coming into this episode and it's like there's some pretty major things to be resolved. One of them is who the heck is Susan Twist? And in my mind, that kind of takes a little bit of priority over Ruby Sunday. I want to know who
See,
Susan
I thought it
Twist
was
is.
I literally opposite.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
To
I
me,
was
it's
like,
like if we find out who Susan Twist is, we find out who Ruby Sunday is. Like, give me
hmm,
that big thing first, and then Ruby kind of will follow shortly thereafter. So when we take this hard break at the beginning, and it's like, oh yeah, Susan Twist, Susan Twist. Oh, but there's actually someone who's more mysterious. Ruby Sunday, go grab a VHS. It felt like the episode just like slowed to a crawl
hmm.
for me. So by the time we get to the time window, it finally feels like, oh, okay. So I started out really high and then took this dip. And then once we get in the time, well, once Mrs. Flood's like, he can't wait any longer. And then we get to the time window. It's like, oh dang, things are definitely amping up at this point.
Yeah, yeah. I guess I was a little opposite in that I thought the bigger mystery, the more important mystery was Ruby, and
Okay.
that the Susan Twist thing was kind of like, okay, this little Easter egg that pops up in every episode, but we really don't know why.
Yeah.
We kind of all had predicted that there was some connection to the Pantheon and the gods with her. Maybe she was, the big bad at the end.
Yeah.
And so maybe that would become more important than Ruby, but I thought, the overall story of the stuff they had actually revealed or like kind of given us information about seemed to be more pointing toward the eventual reveal of what's going on with Ruby. Now, it's probably all connected. So
Oh
they're
yeah.
they're
Yeah. Yeah.
tied
Yeah.
together, but it did kind of feel like they're trying to do two different things with this episode. And there were moments where it felt a little disconnected, like, oh, maybe they should have just done one episode focused on the Ruby mystery and then a separate
Yeah.
episode focused on the Susan Twist mystery, instead of trying to blend it all together. But it might all make sense after we see the second half
It,
of this.
it might all make sense. And for the fact of the matter that they covered so much within a 48-minute episode, thereabouts, it didn't feel overly jam-packed. It felt pretty tight and it felt like it flowed pretty well for the most part. Like I think in years past we've gotten an episode like this that is just like chocked full to the brim of so many things, so many different things that so much of it falls short. So much of it doesn't feel like it's connected. So much of it feels slightly random and not needed. Thinking back on this episode, other than the individuals that it's like, why are you there? I don't know if there's much that I'd be like, oh, you could actually cut out that entire thing and it would still be fine. Like the time window is weird, but I feel like once you get to the TARDIS, because the soldier walks behind the TARDIS is something, he disappears, and then it's like, oh, dang, okay. This entire time window thing served a purpose. The TARDIS has been borked for a while. It's been jacked up since the beginning of the season. Yeah, I think it played out well.
Yeah, I think yeah, I agree with you. I thought the episode, especially on a rewatch, was you know it was pretty straightforward. There were a lot of unnecessary characters, but they didn't really use those characters that
Right.
much. So it wasn't like they did some side mission with Rose or some side thing with Carla. Like they they kind of were there and they made it,
Right.
you know, they had a couple lines, but they didn't really distract from
Right.
the main story. And I thought the story was pretty well done in general.
Yes.
So they're in the time window, things go wrong, and basically once they realize this entity is kind of around the TARDIS and they don't know what it is, everybody kind of starts to freak out, and then I guess it kind of overloads or breaks down or blows up.
Yeah.
There's an explosion, everything shuts down. It's like what was that thing? And was it, you know, is it here now? Was it in the
Right.
past only? Why is it on the VHS? You know, that type of thing, you know, they start to question what's going on. And the doctor's so spooked by it, he's like, I need to go see Susan Triad now. Like, take me
Yeah.
to her. You know,
Yep.
because he was kind of afraid, you know, they had kind of, once they had thrown out the idea that it could be his granddaughter, it was almost like he was like, yeah, I'm not sure I'm ready to face that right now. Or now he's like, okay, this has all happened. Now I need more answers.
Yeah.
Let's go talk to her. So they bring him to the I guess wherever the headquarters of Susan Triad or whatever building they were filming her speech in.
Yeah. And from that point forward, it kind of progresses pretty quickly, actually, because Mel and the doctor go to see Susan Triad, and everybody else kind of hangs out at Unit, and things move very quickly in both places. The
Yeah,
doctor does have that breakdown in the hallway, right?
yeah,
Still, maybe he's processing Chidozie's death. Still, like something happened there. Maybe he's uh, still processing the fact that Susan might be his granddaughter. Um, but punches a wall. Mel has to kind of set him straight. Um,
yeah. There was definitely. I think he was mostly probably upset he had caused the death of someone, and then he was like still confused. He doesn't like to not know what's going on,
yeah,
and he's like, "Why was she pointing at me? You know, why me? You know, like he was sulking. He was definitely
yeah,
sulking, and he had a little bit of a tantrum there. I don't mind to see the doctor lose his temper. It happens, you know.
no,
It's happened in
yeah,
the past. This felt a little more tantrumy and sulky than, you know, we've seen maybe in the past. Um, you know, point me to episodes. I'm sure I'm wrong. There's some, you know, somebody out there right now like, well, actually in season 5, episode 3, da, da, da. You know, like maybe there was another time that something like this happened. In my memory right now, I can't think of moments that felt this way with the doctor and kind of how he acted. And I think in that moment, Mel was playing the part of the audience where
that's
it was what I wanted to say to the
yeah.
doctors, get your stuff together and
I
figure this
mean,
out, you know, like get off the floor and do your
right.
job. You're the doctor. You're supposed to be the one
It
that, you know, solves these problems.
it was very much of like the parent-child relationship where she just looks at him finished. Like,
Yeah. I was like,
stop.
I was like,
Yeah.
bravo, Mel. You are now
Are
in
you,
my top 3 favorite companions. Rory has
I
been
mean,
knocked off the list.
right, right. And then she's just like, stop grizzling, which that must be a very British phrase, stop grizzling. I don't know what that means. Someone please inform me, but stop grizzling and fix it. Like,
Yeah.
you're done. Now let's move forward.
Yeah.
Played
No,
out really well.
I
And the
loved
doctor
it.
just kind of like smiles and jumps up and like
He's like, all right,
goes
it
after
worked.
her.
Yeah, it
Yep.
worked. He goes, he meets Susan Trad. You know, he has a moment where I think he's hoping maybe that it's his granddaughter and like he's expecting it, or maybe he's just preparing himself mentally for it. But he has a moment where he, you know, tries to interact with her. They're rushing her off to give her speech. And so
Yeah,
he doesn't really have a lot of time. And then he's like, she said something about having dreams, right? And then
yeah,
he's like, "What do you dream about?" And he's yelling at her. And then he starts to name the times that he's seen
yeah.
her. And then that's like clicking with her. Like she is
Yep,
now being like, "Oh, okay." So it kind of rattles her right before
right.
she goes off and gives her speech.
And this is one of those things where it's like the writing throughout the series it's been pretty spot on because not many things are said that as an audience we'd be like, wait a minute, that was a really weird thing to say, that another character doesn't jump in and like question what was just said. Because the doctor's like, do you dream about a girl called Lindy? Do you dream about a place called Pacifico del Rio? Do you dream about being an ambulance? And like that's a really weird thing to ask someone. Do you dream about being an ambulance? And Mel is like, being an ambulance? Like Mel recognizes that's a really weird thing to say, but that's the one that kind of gets Susan Triad to be like, wait a minute, like this is really weird. You're you are actually hitting the nail on the head. At least that's what her face says.
Right.
Um,
And back
but
at unit, I guess they've realized that on the VHS tape now, so they're seeing the monster, whatever it is, in the tape now, which previously had never been there. So,
right,
time has been changed based on
right,
whatever events are occurring here, where now what is reality and what's on the videotape has completely changed, and now this monster is now appearing there. So that's really alarming Kate and the others back at unit. She's trying to communicate that to the doctor, but the doctor's kind of wrapped up in what's going on with Susan Triad.
right. And that's when again, like things are just picking up speed because everybody at unit is starting to realize what's happening, that honestly the TARDIS is kind of to blame. This is when Morris is like chance of a trap 100% and it's here. You have Harriet, who was just another unit character operator that we start to find out, yeah, Harriet, but her last name is Arbinger.
Harbinger, don't trust anyone
So
with the first name that starts with H.
oh yeah, no,
If
absolutely
I
not.
ever, yeah, if they ever meet like a Harold or something like in the future, I'm gonna be like, Harold, what? Like, what's his last name? Anything that
Right.
anybody that
Yep.
starts with an H now, I'm gonna suspect is a harbinger.
And this is where, like, honestly, this is where the tone of the entire episode, it gets dark pretty quickly. I feel like anytime someone starts to act in a possessed manner,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's when it's like, okay, this, what was it? The Devil Pit? What was that episode of Tenet where everybody just like goes crazy and there's a giant demon at the end in a pit? It is like the Devil's Pit, something like that, right? I
I
don't
don't know the
know.
title, but yeah, I
Oh,
know what
there's
episode you're talking about.
yeah, where like the tally marks on the wall and people are just going crazy. Those are dark episodes. And this one, once Harriet starts just recounting, goes into her speech, that's when it's
Loved
like,
it.
okay, stuff is hitting the fan.
Yes, I loved it. I loved it when this episode started to get dark.
Yeah,
You like you said, back all the way back to Mrs. Flood, but like that was kind of the moment where it changed. The tone changed, and it just kept getting creepier and
yeah.
scarier and darker. And I was like, yes. Like I was really afraid it was gonna be like Super Friends, at the beginning, and everybody get together, and it's gonna be this fun, like silly episode where we drag the Earth through, the galaxy, and like, we've seen all that kind of stuff where
Yeah,
it just gets kind of silly. And the fact that this one took a different turn and was all about, just yeah, it's this really evil entity that's coming. And these are, the Harbinger, is announcing the presence in like the this pantheon of people or this pantheon of gods that we've already been told about. We've only met a few of them, but the
right.
list the list is quite long of the others that are part of this. And yeah, I thought it was really cool.
Yeah. And at the same time that this is happening at Unit, right? Susan Triad is slowly falling apart, right? Like things are, she's starting to stumble over her words. She is looking very confused. Like she has no idea what's going on. And
Yeah.
it's kind of one of those, like, I don't know, fob watch situations, right? Where you don't, you didn't realize, or she didn't realize who she really was. Um, and
Hmm.
I don't know if she ever would realize who she was ever was, even if she was a real person. Because as Unit is falling apart, so is Susan Triad.
So what's your theory on what is she?
I think she is exactly what Harriet Arbinger was. She's just another, and probably
A
what
minion.
Mrs.
She's
Flood
just
is. She's
okay.
just another minion. She's just another mouthpiece. She's just another. She's the she's the voice of Sauron. She's the mouth of Sauron. She just goes ahead of the big bad of this
Yeah, and she
episode.
seems to be specifically, you know, she's obviously related to the big god that shows up at the
Yeah,
end because the idea of like death and destruction, and she can just touch you and turn you to dust.
right.
And she kind of has this like this whole zombie kind of look to her that she changes. So I guess my question, maybe expanding the question a little bit, is do you think that she was unaware of her role up to this moment, or she was just hiding her role up to this moment? And do you think all the other iterations of her that they have come across actually were her? Or is it just this God has projected that face in these other
Yeah.
places and you're just seeing, or do you think she actually existed in all those? I mean, it's a question I guess we don't know the answer to, but I was curious to hear your thoughts on like
No,
how deep do you think this goes?
I mean the fact that she did have some recognition of the question of like, have you dreamt of being in an ambulance?
Hmm.
Like she was clearly tired. She was clearly having dreams. The doctor put his finger directly on what her dreams have been. I think she was the same individual in those instances, the same individual connected. It's the whole Marvel universe, Doctor Strange. Like when you have dreams, you're dreaming of your other self in another dimension, right? Like it's almost like they tapped that idea with Susan Triad, where when she was dreaming of her other selves in other places. Because she had some recognition there. That said, I don't think she knew why. I don't
Hmm.
think she was aware of what was actually happening because to her, Susan Triad, they were just dreams. Um,
So you
there
think
was
she
no
was just like a
reality to them.
normal person in all these other instances and lived those lives,
Yeah.
and then just in this moment when the God needed her, it kind of awoken her to her real purpose, which was what? Because if she wasn't,
Uh, to
if
reach out
she,
and touch people.
yeah, but if she wasn't already working knowingly for this God, but coming
Yeah.
across Ruby in all these other instances, then what was the purpose? Like, was she keeping an eye on Ruby? I guess not, because she wouldn't be reporting back to the God if she didn't know
Yeah.
that she
Yeah.
was.
True. True.
So that's why I think it might go a little deeper that, maybe in this, maybe as she was Susan Triad, she was unaware, but I think in
Yeah.
previous versions of her, she probably was aware of her role.
So,
So,
so how much do you think this technology that she was supposedly going to change the world with? Do you think that's still going to come into play? Do you think there is
hmm,
something with the technology that the big bad, the evil god is going to be using to
yeah,
impact the world? Is that where the Empire of Death comes from? Because it's going to take
yeah.
over the world, the technology that Susan Triad was
I think
working
it's
on?
connected to that technology. Yeah, so I think
Yeah.
that's a good point because then maybe that was all part of the plan
Oh, dude.
to have her character come up with something that she was thinking was beneficial, but he knows the true nature of it is going to actually be negative. So,
So they pull the rug out from underneath us at the end, and they're like, "Oh, we saw the wrong anagram. The anagram is actually, but in reality, the anagram really was TARDIS. Like that's
what was S
it's
TARDIS, right?
both, right? I know it was S Triad, which rearranged as
Oh yeah,
TARDIS,
yeah. S triad is
but
TARDIS, but then
as
it was
opposed to
Su,
Susan Tech,
which was just Sutek.
right? But both of them are right because I mean, we've already jumped ahead. The big reveal is that Sutek is there, but also the big reveal is that Sutek has been whispering to the TARDIS the entire time and kind of attached itself to the TARDIS. So everywhere the TARDIS showed up, Sutek was there as well. So everywhere the TARDIS went, Susan Twist.
Right.
was there as well.
That's why I'm kind
That's
of thinking it more as like she wasn't physically those people, but it was more
yeah.
of a kind of almost like a projection of, those people did exist, but the doctor and Ruby saw Susan's face.
But it's a projection of the TARDIS,
But it was
right?
different
Like the
people.
TARDIS is the one that's projecting it.
Yeah,
That's
or the tag along God that's on the TARDIS or whatever. I still
yeah.
don't
I
know that
mean,
I completely understand, you know, how long Sutek's been tagging along with the TARDIS. Is he just kind of hanging around waiting for his moment? Like if he was the one who waits or he's coming or whatever, like if he was
yeah.
there the whole time, like I don't know. Like it
Well,
maybe, and we probably won't ever know exactly the nature of everything that was happening, but there's some connection to the TARDIS with Sutek.
I think the lines that stick out to me and the ones that concern me the most are where Harriet it says he's braved the storm and the darkness and the pain. He whispered to the vessel being the TARDIS at this point, right? All this time he whispered and delighted and seduced, and the vessel did obey. For none should be more mighty and none should be more wise than the king himself. Like he seduced the TARDIS. He didn't just like surround and capture the TARDIS. He
But the thing
seduced the
is,
TARDIS.
okay, so I'll get nitpicky. What's our evidence? Like, what has it done? Like, it's not like the TARDIS has been like acting crazy this whole season or like taking them to places that don't make sense or like taking them to places where, there's an evil character that maybe like if that's what's been happening, then why not plant some seeds that would kind of make us question like the TARDIS and what's going
So
on?
And I mean, some fans are pointing out the fact that like the TARDIS has been groaning all season, and the Doctor's like, "Oh, it doesn't like bounty hunters. Oh, it's fine. It's just playing Wild Blue Yonder." Like, it's like there are
So the
things that the
groaning was the
TARDIS.
tell. Like,
I mean, that's what it's doing in this scene too. Is the TARDIS is like groaning and making noises.
but
That's
what was the purpose of it? Like, what was the
so
the god? Like, why would he whisper to the TARDIS and take over the vessel unless he was using it for a purpose? It doesn't seem like he's
right.
done anything with it.
Not yet, but I think there is like
But
the
now he's
TARDIS
been
is crazy.
revealed.
I
If he
know, but
was
the
doing it
TARDIS
all
is crazy.
undercover, that's when
But
to
but
do
the
it.
time has come. The time has come. That's
Yeah.
everything has
So
come
I hope the
to
TARDIS
full.
plays into whatever the big finale is. Like,
Do you though?
well, I don't want the TARDIS to be like destroyed or anything, but I would
No,
think.
not destroyed. But do you? Are you? And this is a question I legitimately wanted to ask you. So like for me, like you can't touch the. I guess you can touch the Doctor, right? Because he plays chess against himself, in the Cyberman episode. But it's like you can't jack up the TARDIS. I don't know. To me, the TARDIS is like that one an untouchable thing about Doctor Who. Like, don't mess with the TARDIS. That is, I mean, the Doctor's wife, like, right? Like, we know the TARDIS is a person. The TARDIS is a character in and of itself. Would the TARDIS ever be seduced and turn on the Doctor? I have a hard time. That whole line about he seduced the vessel. Like, is that possible? I thought the TARDIS loved the Doctor. Like, could the TARDIS actually turn on the Doctor? Um, I don't know if I want the TARDIS to come into play. I think it has to just by
There's got to
based
be
on how it's set
payoff.
up.
Like, why
But
have it? Yeah, why
could
have
the
it?
TARDIS
Like,
turn on the Doctor, Aaron? Could the TARDIS turn on the Doctor?
the TARDIS could pretend to turn on the Doctor and then double cross. It'll
Cheat.
pretend to play along, and then at the end, it'll save the day. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I was trying to wrap my head around everything they were revealing and just being like, okay, what am I supposed to be reading about
Yeah.
this? It was a little. There's so much more we could probably talk about. It was a little underwhelming, I will say. I love the part where like Susan Twist or Susan whatever,
Yeah.
she, the whole zombie, the makeup looked really cool. She's killing people, like,
Yeah.
just, grab somebody and they turn to sand. The doctor seems like terrified of her. That was kind of cool. Definitely wasn't what we were probably all expecting. Like, I think a lot of people were just kind of assuming that she was going to be the big bad and like that was
Yeah.
going to be the big reveal. So the fact that she ended up just being kind of a minion, I actually like that because everyone was wrong. And
Yeah.
I love it when the internet's wrong. But yeah, the Sutek himself, when he showed up and his head pops out and he looks like
Yeah.
this kind of like stereotypical Egyptian god that's shaped like
Yeah.
a fox or wolf or whatever, canine kind of thing. And you're like, Oh, okay. That's not as scary as everything else that they've, done up to this point. The smoke monster, the zombies, the turning people to sand was all terrifying. And then you have this almost like puppet looking thing that pops out. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm the god of, and so I'm like, okay, we're back to Doctor Who. Felt very classic series. And now I
Yeah.
will admit I didn't know the connection, so maybe I have seen images of what the character looked like back in the classic series when he faced off against the Fourth Doctor. Doesn't look like this, so this is, I guess, him
No.
unmasked.
Yeah.
Uh, but it was a bit underwhelming because I'm like, oh, this is the big bad thing that we've been all afraid of that the Doctor's already defeated in as the fourth version of himself. Like I don't know. I just expected it to
Yeah.
be bigger, something he maybe hasn't faced before, something he hasn't defeated before. Um,
I mean that's the same thing with the toy maker though, right? Like we had a return of a character that the Doctor had already
right.
bested at
But the
some
toy
point.
maker was like the beginning. This is the end.
Right.
This is supposed to be
I
the
mean,
the
yes.
leader, the big bad, the one they all report to, essentially.
Right. And but what I'm saying is like they had the ability to add a little bit more weight to the toy maker this time around. Like
Yeah.
to your point, all we saw was the Osiris wannabe, the fox head floating above the TARDIS, the giant puppet. That's all we saw. Maybe the Empire of Death, they'll be able to add a little bit more weight to the character. I will say I was still expecting Susan Triad to be like Death to be Sutek, and I had to like actually go back and forth on whether the thing above the TARDIS was what I was supposed to be afraid of, or whether I was supposed to be afraid of Susan Triad as the zombie thing. But then it became very clear it's actually what's at unit when
Yeah.
Morris tells us, "Hey, this is actually something that we need to be afraid of." Um, I it is a little bit of a letdown. It wasn't as heavy as what I wanted it to be. I think the mystery, if they would have left it more of a mystery, I think that would have probably landed better as opposed to the reveal. And then you're like, oh, okay. It's
Yeah, showing
still
the actual thing.
right,
Like if they could have kept it just a smoke monster or a
right.
disembodied voice or something. I think it would have been more impactful. And then maybe
Yeah.
save the bigger reveal till later and maybe think about the design a little differently. It didn't, it
You
was
got a
kind of
little
a
bit of
moment
time.
of like, I almost imagining like Jim Henson with his hand in the puppet and
Mm.
they're like, oh, I'm Surtak, like it just didn't
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
feel, there wasn't a lot of gravity to it was kind of laughable in the end a
Yeah,
little bit. Like, oh, that was what they're building up to. Apparently Sutek is an actual Egyptian god, so it's not just like a made up thing. And it makes sense that they would have it look like, if it's connected to that. And I know the pyramids of whatever series this came from, was it called the Pyramids of Mars or something like that?
yeah,
So I
yeah,
think there
yeah,
was
yeah.
always that even in those older episodes, there was probably a connection to like kind of, I think the idea was that this alien species was the basis of what Egyptians believed in and the gods they believed in. So there's a connection there. I haven't done a ton of research on this as far as like, what happened in those episodes in the classic series. I just didn't have
Yeah.
time. I kind of was like, oh, I'm going to watch those episodes and then realized I would have to download like whatever that app is that lets you watch old British shows.
No,
BritBox,
BritBox.
yeah. I was like, oh, I'm gonna
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
download
yeah,
BritBox again and pay for a month of it and all this. So I was like, I don't know if it's worth it. I do want to watch these episodes to get a little bit more of a connect or an understanding of kind of what happened with this character.
yeah,
But yeah, my initial reaction and my initial kind of opinion of it was just like, oh, I would have rather maybe this been a new thing and
yeah.
not just a callback to a what essentially was just an alien species and not gods.
Right.
Um, so maybe they're retconning that a bit, but yeah, I'm curious to see how it all plays out.
It does make me wonder like how much of this, right? Like it is a callback. And digging in, it's like, oh, it's part of the pantheon of Discord, and like it has multiple connections. So how much of this would have been able to be figured out by just connecting some of the dots? Like, oh, we have the toy maker and we have Maestro. Like Maestro's new, but we have the toy maker and it ties to the trickster, and like following the path. It feels like though they're taking several different things and smushing them together, right? Like at the time, Sutek wasn't connected with the trickster or with the toy maker. So maybe they are retconning some of these things and tying things together that didn't originally tie together. Um, but it's the visual design. I think the way that it's described, and like the hype man really like sold it. The statements that they strung
Oh
together,
yeah.
the various names, like it made this feel like, oh dang, this is happening. The lead up to the basketball team storming the court, like everybody was excited. And
Some of
then it's
these
like,
other gods that she listed off sound more
oh yeah,
intimidating than Sutek. Like
right,
I'm kind of like, oh, he just seems like another like, side story god, and we're actually getting to the real one later, right? Like this,
right,
that,
right, right, right.
and maybe this is, a misdirect, and like he's pretending to be the big one, but there actually is another one that's coming, but I don't think that's the case.
No,
I think Russell T Davies wanted to call back to some classic series stuff, and it's obvious that this was planned, and
yeah,
that he wanted to call back to this. And maybe we should have put the pieces together. Like, oh, let's look back and see what are all the times that any version of a god has ever appeared in Doctor Who, and this would have come up, if you Googled that probably, and we probably
yeah,
could have, and there's probably a lot of people out there that did make that connection on the message boards and whatnot, but. I'm not versed enough in old classic Who, and I didn't do my. I purposely try not to spoil myself too, so there was an element of not wanting to search too much.
right,
But yeah, um, this is definitely some sort of a like kind of Egyptian god type thing that the Doctor has faced before. Now,
yeah.
I was kind of thinking though with the descriptions of these other gods that we haven't met yet, and some of the cool names or descriptions of them are like, ooh, that seems really spooky. It makes me think that. What's the name of the character that was like something Jack and was the spirit that basically took over the body of
Oh, Mad Jack.
yeah, Mad Jack. So I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, maybe Mad Jack is like an actual like he's just like one of these like chaos
Yes,
gods.
he's part of it. I
Yeah,
mean,
we know it as Mad Jack, but the actual name of this is it just another one of
right,
the gods from the pantheon. Maybe we just didn't make that connection, but maybe it was always intended that whatever possessed, that politician was actually
right.
another one of these gods.
Yeah. I mean, it will be interesting to see how the legend of Ruby Sunday, whatever we find out about Ruby Sunday, like will that play into 73 yards? Like, do we get any indication from the remaining series as to what was being said about Ruby that then led everybody to respond to her the way that they did? Um, are the gods' fingerprints throughout all of this series?
Yeah, exactly. I think there will be stuff we look back on in some of the episodes that we didn't even think were connected
Yeah,
to certain things and be like, oh yeah, okay. Mad Jack was actually, he was one of the gods too. He's one of the ones that she listed off. There were some names that she listed off that would fit, I think,
right. Yeah.
as far as
I
what
was
he
just looking at
was.
the list of names that
Yeah.
I was like, okay, so because we have the toy maker, already know that is God of Games,
Mhm.
Trickster, God of Traps, Maestro, God of Music, Reprobate, the God of Spite. Then we have Mara, the God of Beasts. Um, and then threefold deity of malice, mischief, and misery. There are gods of skin and shame and secrets. There's Incensor, the god of disaster, and her
Mhm.
children, doubt and dread, and then standing on high, death,
Her
which
her
is
children
interesting.
her children doubt and dread make me think of Pain and Panic from
I was
Hercules.
that's yes,
Like
Hercules. You're not wrong.
two great
Um,
characters from Hercules.
oh yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
wait until
so
they show up.
yeah, I think that we'll look back on some of these episodes and make some connections later once all is revealed. I did like I'm kind of joking around about the design of the god and stuff, but overall I thought the build up to everything and the darkness of it all really worked for me. I even just some of the dialogue, you know, I like the part where she's like, "Did you think I was family, doctor?" Like that was harsh.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
he basically thought he was about to meet his granddaughter, and instead, saw this evil character be revealed and like see this
Right.
guy get killed right in front of him. Like it just went from, this anticipation, I think, to just horror. And, for her to kind of rub it in there and like, did you think I was family? I was just like,
Right.
ooh, that's harsh. You'd stab and twist the knife there a little bit.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I don't know. It worked for me. I really thought the episode, although it started out a little rocky in my expectations of what it was going to become, and then all of a sudden it really ramped up, and I was like, okay, I'm down for this. I'm excited for the next half of this and to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, and despite what we might be saying in regards to the character design and kind of a potential letdown, for me, I think that potential letdown is thinking back on the episode. In the moment, though, as it is unfolding live, your very first walkthrough, it is one of, at least for me, it was like, oh dang, this is great. Like we're getting a strong ending. You have the Harbinger, the hype man, you have the build up, you have, oh dang, they're actually touching the TARDIS. You have death, you have freaky looking practical makeup on some of the characters. The doctor seems to be troubled. And then you have Sutek displayed, but I'm so caught up in everything else surrounding it that in that moment I'm not focused on. Oh, that is looking a little bit wonky. Plus, my son watched this episode with me, and when we got to this point, he was like, "What's gonna happen?" So he's definitely invested in this as well. It's a strong showing in this episode.
Yeah, I thought it was good. I liked it overall. As much as I nitpicked little things, but overall, I did like the episode a lot. I left even upon just first view, and I didn't have to watch it two times or whatever to kind of to get excited about it. Just after the first viewing, I was like, "Ooh, that was cool." Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
on board with it. So yeah, we'll
I'm
see
ready
what
to
happens.
see. Yep, and that's exactly. I'm ready to see what happens the next go round. Empire of Death. I mean, that's Sutek is death. What this empire looks like. Do you think we're gonna get like this massive time jump? Are we gonna like fast forward
Oh,
3 months in the future and find out that like death has taken over the planet and there's a resistance crew
oh,
fighting?
please no. That happened.
I
That was like Donna.
know.
Remember Donna and her family living in like, oh
Yep.
no, please no. That was,
Martha and Mickey are,
you know how much I love
are
time jumps where they make people go through suffering. Yeah, no, I hope not. I hope it just kind of is a picks up where they left off. They have to, figure out how to fight the thing. No, if they do some sort of long time jump where everyone's been living under the thumb of this god for, 10 years or whatever, not for me. But yeah.
We'll see. We'll see. We're only a few days away from knowing for sure.
Yes, yes. So. All right. Well, was there anything else? Like, was there anything in the trailer? The trailer was kind of minimal. They didn't reveal
Yeah.
much. I did watch a little bit of the behind the scenes stuff. There wasn't anything that really stood out to me in that either. So, yeah.
No, I have nothing. There's a bunch of fun lines here and there throughout, but nothing really else to call out. I mean, to your point, I feel like it is fairly straightforward. There's not a lot of logic leaps that you have to take in this episode to get where you want to go. But
All right. Well, I guess we will wrap it up for now. One more episode after this to review, and then I guess another long break until more Doctor Who. I guess my assumption
until the Christmas
is,
special.
yeah, Christmas special would be the next thing.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, until next time.
So we look different, but we're still the same. I mean, we talked about not evolving. That's the Doctor. We look different, but we still the same. All those comments about it's been 10 years. We've definitely aged.
We haven't, we haven't, I think some of that conversation was before I started recording. So,
I know,
um,
right? The
so
YouTube videos are not even a year old, and someone already is like, "Man, they've aged."
that
Uh,
was, that's true. Yeah, we got a YouTube comment where somebody made a lengthy comment, I think, was it? Is that
yeah,
what I'm
yeah,
thinking of?
yeah.
Yeah. Right.
It was a podcast review, and they were commenting on. Yeah, we started 10 years ago, and you can definitely tell that we've aged.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
But it was a positive review though, in
oh
general. It
yeah,
just was like,
gotta love
yeah,
it.
you can really tell they've aged.
Yep.
And that was just purely based on our voices, I think, because they hadn't really watched any of the YouTube stuff.
No.
It was all, yeah, it was
Yeah.
all podcast stuff. But
There was also a comment on an Instagram story that I posted that someone was like, "You look totally different than what I expected."
yeah, I saw
It's
that too.
like
I know. I was like, I
they're
almost wanted to respond and be like, is that good or bad?
I know, right?